So in today's message about myths and misunderstandings and misconceptions, we're going to be talking about something that may make some people uneasy in relation to Jesus. But we're not going to be talking about misconceptions or misunderstandings today. Instead, today we're looking at a myth. And that myth is that Jesus never says an unkind or mean word to anyone. That Jesus only spoke words of compassion and invitation. This particular myth has been quoted many times by people trying to validate what it means to be like Jesus. This idea has been shared consistently. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've seen on social media, or I've heard other pastors, I've heard Christians talk about how Jesus was always welcoming. And Jesus was always only kind. I want to talk to you this morning about an interaction between Jesus and a woman trying to get her daughter healed in the New Testament. And this particular woman's story is recorded twice in the Gospels. It's found in Matthew and in Mark. We'll be looking at the Mark version. That's only because most theologians believe that Mark was written first, closest to when the events of the life of Jesus happened, and that both Matthew and Luke use Mark as a source for the writings of their Gospels. And so anytime I can use Mark, that's where I tend to go to because it's first. Matthew is written for a Jewish audience, while Mark is not really written for any particular audience in mind. I will tell you, though, that while I'll be reading from the Mark version, I will reference the Matthew version as well. So our scripture this morning is Mark 7, verses 24 through 30. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there, yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Greek of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed, the demon gone. So there's a ton of stuff that's going on in these verses. The first thing is that we are told in the Gospel of Matthew that this woman is a Canaanite. And in Mark, we're told that she's a Greek and a Syrophoenician. The Canaanites were people that were pagan worshipers. They were displaced. They weren't pagan worshipers. I read ahead in my notes. The Canaanites were people that were displaced when God's people were given the promised land. The Greeks were pagan worshipers. And the Syrophoenicians was a region that was primarily inhabited by Gentiles and various sorts of pagans. Basically, both Matthew and Mark want us to know that you don't get much more a Gentile. You don't get much more outside of the people of God than this particular woman. The fact that she was a Canaanite speaks volumes to the courage of this woman. There was not only not any love between Canaanites and Israelites, there was enmity. There was hostility. There was anger. But this woman puts that aside and approaches Jesus in humility. And in Matthew's scripture, she begs for mercy and calls Jesus the proper title of Son of David. In every possible way, she is humbling herself before Jesus. And then she makes a request. "My daughter is possessed. Please heal her. Drive the demon out." And the response of Jesus is what is troubling for people and causes issues. Jesus says that the children's food shouldn't be given to dogs. That's not really the image of the Jesus that we run with, is it? That's not really the loving statement, the welcoming statement, the inviting statement, the kind statement. In antiquity, there was no greater insult than to be called a dog. Dogs were scavengers. They ate garbage. Sometimes they even ate their own waste. They could turn on their masters and cause them harm. So make no mistake, this phrasing by Jesus is harsh. There's one more level beyond that. Coming from a Jewish rabbi to somebody outside of the nation of Israel, some might even see this as an ethnic slur. Now, some scholars have tried to make it better, trying to nice it up by saying that Jesus wasn't referring to dogs as scavengers or that they were attacking people or that they were unworthy. That since this table involved children, it was more like Jesus was talking about a family pet. And I want to be honest with you, that really doesn't make it better. Whether you're insulting someone or calling them your pet, that does not make it an okay statement. That does not work. That does not jive with what we understand about Jesus and this idea, this myth, that he never spoke unkind words. He called this woman and her daughter dogs, as being less than the Israelite people. That's why we struggle with this scripture. Because it doesn't tell us Jesus' thoughts or motivation. There's no subscript. There's nothing there that's like Jesus said it because of this, or Jesus was thinking this, or Jesus meant this. We're just left with this story where Jesus says, "You're dogs." This is why the idea of Jesus never speaking unkind words and only speaking words of imitation and compassion is a myth. Because that's clearly not what's happening here. I do want to share with you, though, while we might not be able to say Jesus never spoke unkind or harsh words, I do believe maybe we could say that Jesus never spoke unloving words. Right now you might be saying, wait a minute, how is what Jesus said loving? If it's not kind, if it's not compassionate, if it's not inviting, how might it be loving? And I want to share with you, based on evidence that we can glean from Scripture about Jesus and how Jesus did, I'm going to give you the best answer I can because I just told you Scripture doesn't tell us motivations. That's why sometimes it's hard. Anybody ever have problems reading the Bible? You're like, what does that mean? What do I do? Sometimes we have definitive information. Sometimes we have to take the whole collective of what we know and do the best we can. And so as I read this Scripture, as I think about Jesus and all the stories and all the Gospels and what he does and how he does and what Jesus' mission is, I can say that you might not see this as a loving statement if you only view love as grace and mercy. If you only view love as one half, one part, and you leave out the second half of discipline and accountability. In this scripture, before grace and mercy, I believe Jesus uses words of discipline. I believe what's happening here, maybe that he's testing the woman's statement. Is he asking her, is it real, what you're coming to ask of me? Or are you trying to use me? Like the pagan gods you're used to. I mean, remember, set the scene. Between Matthew and Mark, this woman has come to Jesus. She has said the right words. She's taken the right actions. She has done the things that she might do in worship to pagan gods, to cajole them, to push them, to pull them, to get what she wants. And maybe Jesus' question, this statement of only giving to the children what's theirs and not feeding the dogs, is a statement saying, are you real? Are you here because you believe that this can happen, that God can heal your daughter? Or are you here because you're hedging your bets? And this is what you do with the other gods, and you know that I'm in town. I think you get the answer when you look at how Jesus responds to what she says. The first thing this woman does after her daughter being insulted and herself being insulted, she doesn't quit. She doesn't get in a huff. She doesn't get grumpy or angry. She's persistent. And she shows wisdom in her answer to the statement of Jesus. She actually gives him what I like to call a Jesus answer. That's kind of funny, isn't it? This woman gave Jesus a Jesus answer. Let me explain to you what that means. There are many times in Scripture when someone is being slick, when someone is coming to Jesus with some unanswerable question or some idea or some thought that they think is wiser or better or Jesus can't possibly handle. And almost every time, Jesus turns their question around on them and reveals the truth. Reveals what is actually going on, reveals what their motivation really is. And this particular interaction, that's what this woman does with her answer. In the Gospel of Mark particularly, there are multiple arguments and conversations that people have with Jesus, where they're either trying to trip him up or prove him wrong. And Jesus wins them all, except maybe this one. This Gentile pagan woman is the only person to win in one of these argument conversations with Jesus. Is the only person to display the same wisdom that Jesus does in this one moment, because her answer is spectacular. The children that Jesus talks about are the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, and the dogs are everyone else. And this woman's answer acknowledges that importance. She says it. She said, yes, absolutely. But crumbs might fall from the table. This woman acknowledges the status of the chosen people of God, but her answer also shows that she seems to know that the mission of Jesus The plan of God is going to move beyond the chosen people of Israel and be offered to everyone. Fantastic answer to a harsh statement. I believe that's why Jesus is impressed with her answer and how she handles things and where she was going. If Jesus asked her or made this statement to her in the context of finding out, did you really believe? Is there something really structured to this? Or are you trying to manipulate? I think her answer says yes. She does really believe. She is there in truth. She is there seeking the only place that she can go. And that's why, even though Jesus started maybe with words of discipline, words that sound harsh, he ends with words of grace and mercy. The last thing he tells her is, go home, your daughter is healed, the demon's gone. This scripture dispels the myth that Jesus only speaks kind words, but also reveals to us a hard truth. We see a Jesus that doesn't fit the mold of what we would like. We see a Jesus who sometimes says harsh sounding and uncomfortable things. Anybody ever experienced that in life? I mean, we like the Jesus that just says, you're awesome, I love you. Things are cool, right? We like that Jesus. Sometimes we struggle with the Jesus that says, oh, you're in the wrong place. You've done that wrong. That's not right. When Jesus says these more harsh sounding things, it's not to be nasty. It's not to beat us down. It is in some fashion to help us, to mold us, to grow us, to reveal truth to us. And this particular story with the woman isn't the only time Jesus does this. You can think about the moneylenders in the temple. I don't know that you really call that one kind and compassionate, right? Or how about when he rolled into where the religious leaders were and he pronounced the 7 woes on them? If you read the 7 woes, he calls them whitewashed tombs. Basically, on the outside you're pretty, but on the inside you're full of decay, rotting things. He calls them vipers. He goes on through a whole list of things he calls them. None of those things are things you're like, that's awesome, I'm going to put that in a greeting card. Even to Jesus' closest, when Peter stepped out of line, what does he call Peter? Satan. Get behind me, Satan. That's his buddy. That's his guy. The person he's going to build the church on. This woman is not the only example. You see this consistently. When Jesus needs to use words of grace and mercy and forgiveness, that's what he uses. When he needs to use words of discipline, of accountability, of truth that sounds harsh, he does that. And it's all love. And I think that's what we struggle with, is, and I've shared before many times from this spot, we struggle with realizing love has 2 parts. Grace and mercy and discipline and justice and accountability. And we struggle with the idea that the way that we're meant to employ that love is the same way that Jesus does. And he holds them in perfect tension with each other. Jesus does not waver one more to the other side throughout his ministry. He does them both. This myth of Jesus ever speaking harsh words to someone is dangerous because it only portrays half of who Jesus was and what Jesus was doing. And as we are meant to be Christ-like, that is what the name Christian means. If we only embrace half of that, we are not embracing all of Jesus. Christ did both of these things in his ministry and his relationship with others. And if we do not put the work into trying to do the same, we fail in living up to the namesake of Christian. I'm not saying that you have to get it right all the time. I do know that we might have proclivities one way or the other. I've told you before, I am by far more of a grace and mercy person than I am a discipline and accountability person. But I'm working on how to do both of those things well. That's what I'm sharing with you. You don't have to have it all right now. I'm not sharing with you that you are failing in living up to the namesake of Christ if you can't do them both well right now. I'm saying you're failing if you're not trying. I'm saying you're failing if you're not putting the work in. I'm saying you're failing if it's okay that I don't need this other half of Jesus. I'll just take the half that I like, and the half that works for me, and the half that speaks to me, and I'm going to run with that half. I'm saying if that's what you do, you're failing that name. Christian means little Christ. It means when they see us, they see him. And they need to see grace and mercy and discipline and accountability. They need those words of compassion, those words of kindness. But sometimes they also need those words of truth. Those words that sound harsh and are uncomfortable. Both are needed to help us grow. Both are needed for us to share with others, to help them get to where God has called them to be. This morning, as Hannah comes up to lead us in our last song, I want to encourage you in this song of response. Whatever God leads you to do with this message, with these thoughts, with these ideas, do them. If it's to spend time with God talking about it, if it's to spend time talking with someone else, if it's to stand and sing these words, whatever God leads during this time, it is right for you to do. And I encourage you, follow God's leading. Do what God says.